Hello everyone, Throttle-On John here. We're going to change the oil on this 2023 4Runner with the 4-liter V6, which applies to most 4Runners and a very wide time span, at least up to 2024. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to use a lift today, but
4Runners have enough clearance. You could get this done without a lift. I've done more oil changes without a lift than with one. I just happen to have access to this, so I'm going to use it. But you could do this without a lift, no problem. If you wanted more room, you could drive on ramps, but it wouldn't be necessary.
So let's go ahead and we'll get this done. Toyotas are such good vehicles. If you change oil on them and service them, they will last a very, very long time. So one of the first things I did is I came in here, popped the latch, which pops the hood. Then you come around front and already popped this, but you just grab this little latch right here, push it sideways, and then you can pull up the hood. So there's that latch right there. You push that sideways and it unlatches it. It's nice Toyota has hood struts. To perform this oil change, you really don't need much. You just need your Toyota oil filter. You want a drain plug washer. You want a 14mm socket to remove your drain plug. The same 14mm will remove your skid plate on the TRD Pro. You need a 12mm socket to remove the cover covering the engine oil plug. You need an oil filter remover. I'll put links to which ones you can use. There's a couple different kinds. And then you need 6.6 quarts of the specified weight oil. On this vehicle, it's 0.20 weight, so that's what I'm going to use. You need basically 6.6 quarts. Sometimes if I have a partial quart, I always will mark it with X so that I can separate it out from full quarts. So let's get started. So here we are, we're walking under the vehicle. Here's the little cover to where the oil plug is. So we're just going to go ahead and remove these two 12mm bolts. You could use a regular ratchet. I'm just using this so it's a little quicker. And then you remove one, and then you remove the other one. And now you see we have access to the oil plug. Let's go ahead and remove it so it can start to drain. Now if you want to, you can remove the skid plate first and remove the oil filter to make sure you can get that loose. So now we just have a regular ratchet with a 14mm socket on there. And we're just going to go up here to our drain plug and we're going to put it on there. Make sure it's on there securely. The 6-point is even better than a 12-point, so you get a good bite on there. And you just pull on it, and there it goes. Then you should be able to take it out by hand. Make sure you have something that'll hold 7 quarts or so of oil, a drain pan. And we're going to go ahead, and I'm using Costco gloves, but you could use whatever gloves you want. And there it goes. Okay, now we're going to let that drain. While that's draining, we're going to move to the front, take the skid plate off, and get a new oil filter in there. So on the TRD Pro, it's just a matter of removing these 14mm bolts. You have 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we'll just go ahead and remove those now. You could use a regular ratchet, but I'm just going to use this for speed. Keep in mind, this is a pretty good hunk of what feels like metal to me. It could be aluminum, but I think it is a metal. It's very heavy. So just be aware of that when you're taking that off so you don't get conked in the head. If you're on the ground, it actually might be a little easier because you can leverage against the ground, but just be aware that's got some weight to it when you're removing those.
Just a little tip on removing this. The front bolts on the skid plate, the TRD, won't come all the way out because you got these little bushings that shim it up. The rear ones don't have that, so you'll pull the rear ones all the way out. So just a little tip there.
Here we are, we have the oil filter, the cartridge system, so easy to service. And I love Toyotas, how everything's always so clean in here, no oil leaks. So with this, all you do is you pull down this little clip right here, and that way it doesn't get caught on the upper part. You don't have to remove it all the way like I just did. You just have to slide it down. Just had to slide it down so it's not going to get caught on this housing. And I indexed mine when it was new. I just put a little mark of yellow there. But there is a torque spec on that we can use, but I just kind of did that to make it a little easier. Now, it's two ways of doing this. You can remove this, put the tool in, drain the oil first, or you can just crack it open. I just have something underneath here to catch oil. I crack it open. The Carnut channel, that guy's way smarter than me on mechanical stuff, so I follow his advice. He says he just leaves these in. It's one less point that you could get wrong and leak, but I've done that plenty of times before. I watched his channel, drain the oil out of here first with a little tool. They give you the little plastic thing that sticks up in there. You can do that, but I just crack it open, let it drain for a little bit, and then remove it the rest of the way. But you can do it either way. You can take your pick. So let's go ahead and open that up now. So get your tool on there. There's one that fits here, one that fits over this other part of the housing, and then you just break it loose. I'm doing this by hand. It's not taking a lot. Eventually it's going to start to have some oil come out, and I'll just stop and let it drain for a little bit. And this has some threads to it, so it's going to take a little bit. Doesn't take a lot of force, but because it's kind of has an O-ring and it's fitting up aluminum into plastic kind of into aluminum, it's got a little bit of a fit to it. So you're going to have to just keep cranking this open until you'll eventually get some oil to start to bleed out of there. And then you can, I see the O-ring now, you can see the little O-ring. Now we're going to start to have some oil come out. I can actually remove this because I can get it by hand now. And I'm just going to let that leak for a little bit. Here comes some oil. Let's just let that leak for a little while. Okay, I'm letting it leak into my pan down here. And I'm just going to let this leak for a little while, and then I'll remove it the rest of the way when that slows down. While that's doing that, let's put our oil plug in. So here's our oil plug. I'm glad this happened so you can see it. See how this old washer is stuck on there? You wouldn't want to double washer that, so we got to get that off. You could probably reuse that a time or two, but I'm going to take it off. I'm going to use something plastic. You can even put the bolt in there and kind of cock it sideways, but I'm going to use something plastic so I don't scratch that mating surface to the oil pan. Just like a trim tool will work well. So here we are with the plastic trim tool. We can just kind of scrape around on there and get that gasket off. We don't want to double gasket that. And that's surprising how well that's sealed on there. So I think I want to get both hands and just kind of finagle that washer off of there. So I did have quite the time getting that washer off. I finally just caught, the washer was here. I caught the inside of the washer and I just flicked it off with this pick. So that way it doesn't damage the mating surface to the oil pan, but I got up where the threads were and then I just caught it under the edge and then just flicked it off. So if that happens to you, there's one way to get it off, but make sure you don't double washer that. So now that I got this nice and clean, I like to always put some grease on these threads. So I'm going to put some grease around these threads in the washer. Not where it's going to get up in the motor, but just kind of on these threads here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll go ahead and put some on this washer on both sides as well. So I'm going to do that now. So here we go. I have grease on the threads, but not where it's going to go up in the engine. So we'll go ahead and let's put the oil plug in the motor. So here we are. I've wiped this off. This is nice and clean. Now we'll go ahead and put this plug up in here. Always start it by hand. I have my new washer on, and you always start that by hand. And I never put stuff back in, even though I may remove it with my little electric ratchet. I will never start it by hand. You don't want to cross thread. So here we go. We got this in. Got it cleaned up here. And now I'm going to get my 14 millimeter on there, socket, and we're just going to snug it up. And with this, you can use the spec torque settings, but I usually just kind of go to where you can see I'm tightening this down. I can feel it snugging, and then it bottoms out. And with just mild to moderate pressure, and that's it. You don't need to try to tighten that like it's a lug nut. So you don't need to over torque that. When in doubt, you could use the torque specs, but I just get it to where it's snug and I stop. There's a point where you can feel the washer compressing and you can feel it bottom out, and and you stop. So you do not tighten it like a lug nut, not anything tight like that. You could strip this out in here, and then that would be a bad day. You'd have a lot of work ahead of you then. Now we can replace this cover. You could wait to make sure it doesn't leak, but there wouldn't be anything wrong with replacing that cover now. Just replacing the cover and these two screws. And while I'm in here, I always just wipe things down and clean everything up. It's a good time to just tidy everything up in your engine. And while you're under there, look around for oil leaks, inspect things. But generally speaking, that's one of the things I love about Toyotas is they don't leak. They just tend to not leak unless they got lots and lots of miles, and then it's even at that a mild leak. So just look around for any leaks, and if you do, you could always get a mechanic's opinion. But I've had other new vehicles, and I'm not going to mention names, but they leaked. I had one vehicle where it had a new oil pan on it, resealed 2 times within a 3-year period. And it was brand new, and it was not a cheap vehicle either. So, I don't know, something to think about, but I have never had that trouble with a Toyota. So likewise, you just start these by hand. These 12 millimeters, just get them threaded in there, and then we'll just lightly snug those down with a hand ratchet. Okay, this has had a long time to drain since I was fiddling with the drain plug, so we removed that. And look, there's not any real oil that comes out unless I tip it to the side after doing that. So I think the car nut channel he gave, that was a good suggestion, not fiddling with that thing in the end. So, but do what you want. Now it's just a matter of removing this cartridge out, replacing a few O-rings, and wiping that out up in there and buttoning it all back up together. Yeah, so before you go to your workbench, dump the oil out of this canister. Take a look at your oil filter, look for any debris. This one looks good. I don't see any shavings or anything. You can get a light on there, but it looks fine. So here we are at our workbench. You always want to do this like you're doing surgery, right? You want this to be clean is the way I like to think of it. I have my 2 O-rings. We have this one here. The smaller one is for this piece. If you removed that, you could replace that if you wanted to. But I'm going with the car nut channel recommendation. And then it's just a matter of, we wiped around in here. All that looks clean. And then we're just going to put this filter in. This is a Toyota filter. And that's just going to insert on there. Push it to where it bottoms out. And then we're going to replace this old O-ring with the new one. And I'm just going to use a pick to lightly pull that out without scratching anything. So just take your time and let's go ahead and put a new O-ring on there right now. The old filter I had was a TRD filter. That is one nice filter. But I'm using the regular Toyota filter. You can see the numbers there, 04152YZZA5. That's a 4Runner filter. And it's just pretty standard. I don't think it's really, I don't do extended oil change intervals with this, so I'm really not worried about if it's a TRD or non-TRD filter. They're both Toyota filters. So replace this O-ring and we'll put it all back together. The old O-ring was green, so it's easier to see, but you can see it seats in this groove. There's a groove down here, but it doesn't go in there because it has these little notches, so it goes in the first groove right ahead of the threads. So, just watch where you take it off and put it back in the same spot. Got your filter in here. We're going to put some oil around this O-ring just with our fingers, make sure this is nice and clean, and we're just going to screw it back on. So I'm taking a clean shop rag. I'm just going to wipe around the inside. You wouldn't want to go from the outside of the engine, then inside. You could contaminate, but you can go inside and then, work your way to the outside. And then I could wipe around the outside of this housing, but then we would not want to go back inside. Remember, we want to keep that nice and clean in there. Okay, that looks great. Let's go ahead and put our new filter in with the cartridge. So here I am taking my finger and putting oil around this O-ring, some clean oil. And that'll just help it when it screws back up in there. So I'll put some oil on here, and I'm going to put some on these threads too. Now, since this filter mounts upside down, you could pre-fill this a little bit, like that. Just enough to where it's not going to pour out. So you can see I put some in there. You could probably put a little more,
but probably isn't a deal breaker either way. Just make sure you're keeping track of your total oil volume so you don't overfill. You know, this will be included in your 6.6 quarts. But you don't have to do that. The manual doesn't say to do that, but it's not a wrong thing. Why would you do that? Just get your oil filter system pressured up, oil back up to the top end of the engine quicker. Get your oil pressure up after an oil change. But again, if you don't do it, the engine will be fine. But if you want to, it's not a wrong thing. To pre-fill this, you just pour, if you want to do that, you just pour a little oil in there and then you let it seep in, and then you just want to stop before you're obviously overflowing on the sides here. So that's something that you can do if you want to. Just watch, let it seep in so you don't make a mess. So now we're just taking our filter with the oiled O-ring. I did put some oil on the threads, and we have our new filter on there, and we're just going to put this up in here and screw that back on. Of course, we always start this by hand. And I find these cartridges are pretty sweet. They spin on freely at first, and then they get a little bit of resistance, which when you use the wrench, and then when they get to a point where they just kind of bottom out and you stop. Just to backtrack for a second, I usually don't crack the oil fill plug up top because the oil comes out so fast anyway, but backtracking, when you're draining this, you could crack the oil fill plug up top, but it is definitely not necessary. It came out plenty fast. So going back to this, we're going to get our little wrench on here, and then we're going to put this on, get it in tighten mode, which just flick the little switch, righty tighty, lefty loosen. So we're going to go right, and then I find with these, you just kind of turn them, and like there is just some light resistance, and there's going to be a point where that's going to start to just bottom out. We're not there yet, but you'll know it when you feel it. And make sure you got that on there nice and secure. And I got my little yellow mark where it's going to index, so I kind of know where I'm going to end up anyway, but I'm still going to pretend like I don't know and just go by feel in case you don't have a mark there. And there's a torque spec on this. You can definitely follow that. That's never the wrong thing. Okay, there. See how that just stops? And that's it. You stop. You don't keep yanking on it. So let's see where we're at on our little yellow mark here. Oh, and look at that. It's lined up perfectly. So there's a point where these just stop, you know, and this is a strong housing, but you don't need to reef on it. And so once you get to that point, now you just flip this up and it'll get on the other side of this housing here. You just kind of push that up there, and then that goes up there. And then if this were to try to spin off, this little clip's gonna hit on one of these tangs up here, and it'll stop that. So just make sure once you get it all the way up, you push that back up to where it stops. Okay, let's put the oil in. And so at this point, you could leave the skid plate off, put the oil in, let this start up and run, but I've done this a number of times. I've never had a leak, so I'm going to go ahead and put the skid plate on now. I do put grease on the bolts that go in here. It just seems to make them go in and out easier, so you may want to try that. And we'll clean this up with a rag, and we'll put our skid plate on and fill it with oil and do the clear the oil reminder light, and that's it. So I grease these bolts up really good. I have my best luck lining up the front ones first, and then I put these back ones in. Be careful not to cross thread those. Put them in by hand for sure. Now we'll just go around with a hand ratchet, and I'll just snug these up. And again, this is a big plate. I don't want this to fall out, so I'm going to get them snug but not crazy tight. And I'll go around, snug all four up, and then keep moving side to side in a crisscross pattern, and we'll tighten that up. So an extra step I always do is just take a microfiber towel or a rag and some Pledge furniture polish or something else to clean this. I wipe everything down. That way if there is a leak, I'll know about it because everything's nice and clean. So it's a nice part about doing it yourself. You can take those extra little steps. For what it's worth, I still can sight through here, and it's hard to see on video, but I can see where that oil filter is in there, and I could sight a leak if it were dripping or something. That cartridge is right in there. Dispose of your oil in the proper manner. This oil is going to be pumped out of here into some gallon jugs and taken to recycling.
Some auto parts stores or auto mechanics will take it, so dispose of your oil in the proper way. Whenever I do an oil change, I just like to clean things up. You know, wipe off your cover. You know, wipe off things, make it look like someone cares in here. So just wipe around a little bit, get off some of the dust, and then, if you want to, and then here's where you will be checking your oil with this yellow dipstick. And here's where we'll be putting the oil in. And make sure you add 0.20 weight oil or what is specified for your vehicle. It usually will say right on the cap, or certainly it'll say in the manual. So we're gonna go ahead and put it in 6.6 quarts now. I'll probably put in maybe 6 and 6.3, and then start it, and then we'll go from there. Or keeping in mind, if you added some to your filter, make sure you deduct that from that 6.6. So that the total that you're adding is 6.6, including the filter. We don't want to overfill. So we'll just unscrew this, getting ready to replace our oil. And then I love these filters that screw into the oil filler. So this is for a Toyota. It says APSG-Z Tools. And this says T, maybe for a Toyota, I'm not sure. But it has the threads that match the threads of the filler, or of the car. So you can come over here and you thread this in, and it's great because then you just never, I mean, I've had funnels, you know, get cockeyed, and then you're filling and they fall out, and then you puke oil all over your motor and it makes a mess, and it's just, you want to do a clean job. So, but you could use a regular funnel, it'll work fine. I've done that more times than I haven't. I just found these and I love them. So now it's just a matter of dumping the oil in. So do what you want, but I always like to double check we have the right oil, 0.20, that's what it says it should take. I like to line up what it takes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I have my partial quart here. I kept track of what I put in, so I'm going to put 6.5 in roughly, and then start the car, shut it off, let it sit a couple minutes, and then check the oil. So let's go ahead and add the oil. Just a little footnote, when you're removing the cellophane from your oil, don't let anything fall into your oil or obviously in your motor. I've seen stories where the oil pickup, when a car was getting serviced thousands of miles later, had some of this debris in the oil pickup of the motor in the oil pan. So be careful. You know, little things can inadvertently happen. So just take your time and don't make a mistake. Anyway, it's not a big deal. Just watch what you're doing when you remove that cellophane. Make sure it's coming out and not going in. Now it's just a matter of dumping your oil in. And I love that funnel. It makes it so easy. Nothing to it. And this is why we did this whole project, is to get new lifeblood oil in this motor. You change your oil every 5,000 miles or every 6 months, depending on use. We could argue intervals. You could get away with every year if you're under 5,000 miles, but you know, it's up to you. It depends on how long you're going to keep the vehicle. I like to keep mine. I'm going to plan on keeping this a while, so I'm going to take good care of it. But you can do what you want. Okay, let's keep adding the oil. Okay, so I put my last half a quart in. I'm going to go ahead and put this in, remove the funnel, put this in, start it, let it run a minute or two, shut it off, and then we'll check the oil. So I have about a little under 6.5 quarts in here now. So we'll go ahead and start this and let this run a couple minutes. I always like to use trip B as my reset it for my oil, so I can know how far I've been between oil changes. That was roughly 3,000 miles. I was getting close to 6 months, so I thought I would change it. So that's just a little trick that I found is useful. So I'll leave trip B, and then let's go ahead and reset the oil reminder light while we're in here. Okay, now to reset the oil light, you're going to hit the ignition switch with a button. This will cover all 5th gen 4Runners. You're going to hit this once. You're going to hit this twice. You're going to get this to where you're on trip A. So we're going to get this on trip A. Okay. Now we're going to go back over here. Next step is turn this off. Okay. Now we're going to press the trip button and hit this once and hit this twice and hold, and it resets the oil maintenance. And that's all there is to it. Hope this helps. Now it's just a matter of pulling the dipstick out, wiping it off on a rag. We're just going to wipe this off so it's nice and clean. Kind of swipe that off. Okay. And now we'll just reinsert it. You push it in. We have the vehicle off now, of course, and we start it for a moment. Let it sit for a few minutes. And we pull this out, and we want it to be between these two marks. And it is. So if we were below that little lower mark, we would add. If we're above, we'd have to take some out. But we're just below the top mark. And 6.6 quarts is the proper amount to fill this. I know this is really hard to see, but our fill mark is right, that's where our level is right now, so we're well below this, so I'm going to add that extra little bit of a quart to get up to 6.6 quarts. I think I added about 6.5, so I'm going to add a fraction more. But we're in the ballpark now. We could leave it if we wanted to. You just don't want to be over this mark, and we wouldn't want to be under this mark. We want to be somewhere in here. So we're in an acceptable range now. And it can be hard to see with new oil. Okay, so there we have it. So easy to change oil on a, on a Toyota. There's no reason you wouldn't want to. And I like knowing that the job is well done, is filled correctly, has the filter done perfect. And I did check under here after running it. There aren't any oil leaks. Everything's good. So that's always a good thing to just do a last check. So there you have it. Hope this helps. And take care of your Toyota, and it'll run a very, very long time. And if you like 4Runner content, I'll be greasing the different circuit fittings for the drivetrain. Eventually I'll do a differential service, but as this vehicle ages, we'll go ahead and keep up to date on all the different things that need to be serviced. So thanks for watching, and don't be afraid to work on this, especially things that are simple like an air filter, ed cabin, air filter, engine oil change. Those are all things that you can do. All right, have a great day.